and welcome to another episode of All Things Conflict with me, your host, Maria Arper. In today's episode, I am delighted to share a conversation with the one and only Jon Wedger, who has made it his mission to expose, highlight, and help cases of child sexual exploitation in our society. It's a riveting conversation. His presence moved me deeply. So buckle up and listen. Jon Wedger, I am so delighted that you've agreed to come here. I really am. Of course, you don't know me, but I know you.
Right.
Because you did a podcast in around 2016 for something called the UK Column.
I think it might have been before that.
Might even have been before that.
I think it might have been 2014, like early
it was
2015,
long.
yeah.
And I remember hearing that and thinking, there's something resonant in this man's voice and conviction that is telling a truth that nobody wants to hear. That was what I really got from listening to you. And then I couldn't find you anywhere. Maybe you were, I don't know.
No, there was a very good reason for that.
Oh, right.
Very good reason.
And go on.
Yeah, well, I mean, Brian Gerrish
Mm-hmm.
is one of the very few of the early alternate media that's still going.
It's still going, aren't they? Yeah.
And his just his whole demeanour and his value system hasn't changed. I've seen them all come and go in a very short period of time. And he's the one who sort of said, look, come on the show. I was in a world of trouble. When I say trouble, I was in a world of trouble. I was frightened back then, and I was taken on the might of the British establishment. I had no idea. I had no idea what I was in for. And I know of the danger I was in and how vicious it would get because of my whistleblowing, speaking out against a cover-up around child prostitution. Don't endorse the term. I never made it up, but I come from a policing background. We say it as it is. A lot of people take umbrage with it. But I've got a thing. If I'm not here to placate adults. If an adult gets a hump with me, I don't care. I'm really not interested. You're an adult. You've got shoulders. I just don't like people hurting kids, abusing kids. I don't like it. So Brian gave me this opportunity and said it will actually help you. I actually didn't see that at the time. I thought, how? This is just going to get me in more and more trouble. Because I come from a disciplined background. I come from a background where we weren't allowed to talk to the press.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the middle of this storm of corruption and I was speaking out. So I did it. I trusted him because he's come from a very similar background, although his was military and mine wasn't. But he was a senior officer and I liked him. So I did. I put absolute blind faith in the man and he delivered. The reason no one heard from me for about 3 years was after I did that interview, that's when I made serious allegations of malfeasance in the public office against senior police officers. So we're hearing this term malfeasance now regarding Peter Mandelson and Andrew and that, but it was a thing of police corruption really, and it's a very, very serious offence. So I made that allegation, and then they came for me. They didn't go for the wrongdoers; they came for me. And that period of time, I hadn't been paid, so I went on for nearly 3 years without being paid, and the reasons being, I every time I came into work, I got arrested. So I was arrested 9 times for weird allegations, spiteful allegations, but allegations that at the very least would put me in prison. And it was part of a campaign to silence me. I went sick and they had to pay me, but didn't. So I didn't get any wage for 3.5 years. So the threat against me if I spoke out initially was the loss of my home, my job and children. I was a single parent of 4 kids. 2 of my kids were still school age at the time. The other 2, I think, had left. Or they had left, yeah. And in amongst all of that, one of my children was involved in a terrible accident. and was in a coma. And in that time, when my whole world was collapsing and the police were looking at not only taking my home, my job, my children, as was a threat, also my liberty, which was heavy on my mind because who would look after my other kids? In amongst that, while I was at the bedside of my son whilst he was dying, the police tried to take one of my children into care. So I went through it, and it was as a result of meeting a guy called Bill Maloney, who's I got to know him really through Brian. Bill Maloney was one of the Brian had interviewed him. He run a media company called Pie and Mash Films, Cockney guy, but had been brought up in a care system as a Irish gypsy family. He was put into the care as a young kid. Although he doesn't sound like a gypsy, he's a Cockney, but he's from Peckham in London. And I think there was 7 of them in care. And him, I think it's only him and 2 others that were alive. The rest died in terrible circumstances. All got abused. But Bill was one of the toughest guys I've ever met. And he was a filmmaker and made films about the abuse of kids in care. And I teamed up with him. And he sort of brought me back into the limelight. He said, no, stand up, speak out. So I set up a project called Voice for the Voiceless. And I went round interviewing people because part of my tradecraft as a detective was that I was a specialist interviewer. I was part of the police have and the military has the same, these very elite little unit, call them elite, but we're just better trained, that's all we are. And you sort of get dedicated once you get quite good at what you do. But I was a natural communicator, so that was really promoted by the police. And they put me on a unit that was interrogation, really. So I did everything from interviewing victims of serious abuse, child abuse. The hardest people to interview are children that have been abused because the parameters of law are so tight. Any little discrepancy, they throw it out. And it's like, it's real time. There's no edit, there's nothing. It's real time. So you really fine-tuned your skills. And I was also interviewing serious offenders. But I'd also be used to coerce people into giving information, like recruiting informants. So I was quite good at, and part of it's manipulation, I suppose. It's all a trade-off, I become a salesman, really. But I had these skills, and Bill said, use them, go and interview people. You're good at talking to people. So I just said, well, if anyone's got a story of their time in care, come and see me. And I didn't know really what I was letting myself in for. This whole new world started up. I had worked with victims and survivors on my role as a detective in child abuse, but these mainly children or adult survivors. I started getting people from the criminal classes come to me. Now, for me, that was the other side of the fence. But serious criminality, I'm talking people that have stood trial for murder, people that have been involved in murder, bank robbers. And there was an anger to them. And the source of the anger was they were sexually abused as children. And it was the same across the board. And once I started putting them out, the first interview I put out got 2.2 million hits. And that was back in them days, Even now that would be viral, but back then, I never monetized anything because I didn't know how. I never did it for the money. The money wasn't. I did have a few fundraising campaigns so I could carry on. But I sort of stopped that because there's a lot of vexated people that aren't very nice out there, and they think you're profiteering from misery and stuff like that. So I sort of stopped that and I just carried on and on and on. And I at the same time, I thought I was on my own with this, but the Jimmy Savile thing occurred. And in as much as that was a cover-up, but you start getting police officers speaking out. So there was 3. One dealt with stuff in Manchester, and I couldn't really connect with that so much as that was blame everything on the Pakistanis, which seems to be the narrative up till now. I'm not saying it's a false narrative, but what I will say is if you think that's a be all and end all, you're being led a lie, fed a lie, led down the wrong path, because it's not. That is a segment of a whole sphere that's going on.
Well, it's like let's watch the juggling act over here, but there's all this stuff you're not seeing because the eyes are over it.
Yeah, and I said, this is high up people involved. And I was sort of told, well, were any of them Pakistani Muslims? I went, well, yeah, but they were small.
Mm-hmm.
I dealt with London, and, London is the most diverse urban conurbation in the world.
Yeah.
Nowhere even comes near. That's why I think it's impossible for a Londoner of my generation and the next to ever be racist. It's
impossible.
It's impossible. It don't happen, Might have done before, but now, no, them days are gone. I don't think.
I find it really weird when I go to other cities and you don't see all the different faces and all the different races. I find it really like something's missing.
Yeah, so I said, well, there were Muslim guys doing it, but there was everything doing it. Every religion was at it, and there were also people very high up at it, and that's not where they wanted it to go. So I started then, went quiet again, and some podcasters started asking me on, and if they asked me on, I tended to do quite well for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd only say the same thing. It never changed. But it's only really been like the latter end of last year when stuff started coming out about Epstein and everything else. We've had these inquiries in the UK. We've had the Elm Guest House expose. We've had Dolphin Square, where they have pointed the finger at the highest level and no one's interested. As soon as it's American, the Epstein list infers. It doesn't even directly say anything. It's an inference. We had a thing called the Rains list, and this was a list compiled by a woman called Dr. Joan Coleman of the Maudsley Hospital. She was a senior social worker, psychotherapist at the UK's largest mental health hospital, practicing hospital, in Brixton in South London. And, it's going to be a crazy hospital because it's a crazy place, and there's a lot of drug addiction and there's a lot of survivors of abuse, everything else. But Joan Coleman, when she interviewed people, and she started finding the same as me. So when I started interviewing people, out of 10 people, that there was a pattern. It was mainly the lower and the working classes. Kids were put into care because home was no good. So again, I get a lot of people come to me and say the social services steal children, the police are all Freemasons. It's these massive sweeping statements. 80% of the child abuse goes on in the home. In the home.
Mm-hmm.
Mum and dad ain't done their job.
Mm-hmm.
I call it the tertiary blame. They blame the police. They blame the social workers. They blame the authorities. They don't blame themselves or their parents. They don't.
And isn't it something like, and also a huge proportion is where there's a step parent or something.
Single parenting is like a vile epidemic that's really eroding our society. And the colloquial term is baby mother, baby father, baby mummy, baby daddy. It sort of is devoid of any responsibility. It's trivialising the most important job you can. And it's also a very childish term, baby mummy, baby daddy. It's childish. And, there's a couple of podcasters that do it that are single parents, and they do it with a laugh. And it fills me with a lot of anger, to be honest. Because I was a single parent, and I brought up 4 kids. 2 weren't mine. I was in my 20s. A lot of responsibility I went through. And it's only when I started interviewing people that the majority of abuse did initially start from the presence of a step-parent. And statistically, they now say, no, I'm not one of those abusive step-parents, but you see all the time, especially with the dating apps, the ins and outs of different people in different lives. And what some of these single mums need to realise, and single dads, but let's stick with the majority, is that paedophiles will predate on you. They will. You advertising that a strong single mum and all that, you are basically putting your kid up for grabs. Yeah. The chance of a child to be sexually abused in their own home goes up by 30 times, 30 times. In America, it's 60. Isn't that horrific in America? Of being sexually abused by a step-parent, by the presence of a step-parent. And some parts of our society, it's a cultural norm not to be married and have children. And it's almost getting a cultural norm everywhere now. And that has to stop. If we're a nation that really loves our children, we need to stop that. And that's coming from someone who pretty much has got a grasp on what's going on, you know? So what I've been saying all along was that this is bigger than the Kashmiri cab drivers, which seems to dominate everything. And then you start getting the alt-right movement, started blaming it all on them, and the migrants coming over, and straight away the first thing they do is to rape a child. And again, I'm not saying they don't do sexual crimes against women or that, because they do. But again, we're missing the point.
But we're not looking at it within it could be, it's a context though, isn't it?
Of course.
Within a bigger context.
And I'm going to explain how and why sex offending against children is different to any other criminality. And why this area, this genre of criminality has always been under-policed and underfunded. So if we take a human being and we sort of look at them as they're made up on three parts, like three balls to a snowman. So we've got the intellectual self, we've got the physical self, we've got the emotional self. And they all interact independent, but they do affect each other. When a child is abused, it affects all three areas. But certain areas can carry on and others can't. Right? So intellectually, a child who's been abused, the younger the abuse, the more damage it's going to cause. Can a child go on to intellectually function? Well, yeah.
Yes, that's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, in fact, they can do a lot better than someone who hasn't, because there's no complacency there, there's no comfort there. And there's a need to say, I am me, you will recognise me, you will see me.
Well, and people often who've been traumatised develop the intellect to cover up for the emotional deficiency.
Yeah, I mean, someone said to me, the people you deal with, a lot of them are thick, they can't read or write. So I said, they might be illiterate, but there's a reason. Because daytime is safe time, night time is dangerous time. You know, you shut your mind down at night and go to sleep, you're going to get, your vigilance needs to be up and awake. So they develop a hypervigilance, but they become nocturnal because that's when the danger comes. So they'll go to school and they're knackered. And then, of course, they don't achieve too well at school, but they can go on to do really well. You see a lot of CEOs of business have got that narcissistic trait. And of course, it breeds narcissism. And I'm not denigrating survivors because I've dedicated my life and suffered a lot in helping them. But people need to understand, that there's always a trade-off. And the reason it breeds narcissism is because you have to concentrate on yourself.
Yeah.
Safety.
You've got to build safety, haven't you? And that's about, always looking and seeing.
Well, children are naturally narcissistic anyway.
Yeah.
But if we don't boundary a kid, then we expand it and it can lead to psychopathy. The two ways you create a narcissist: no love or too much love, spoiling the kid, or giving them none. It's the same thing. You're going to cause problems in that kid's life. And they're going about judgment. Well, we must judge. We have to judge. Because I've gone on a few of these, that's a bit judgmental. No, it's a natural thing. You as a woman, if you're going to travel home late at night, you go into a train carriage because you prejudged it. You know that certain carriages, certain people there ain't going in there because that man or that man doesn't look right. Go into a bar, you'll judge your environment. A person who doesn't judge is an idiot because you're going to get hurt. It's a natural attribute to survival is judgment. And simple as that. So emotionally, so I say intellectually, yeah, without a doubt, do incredibly well. Physically, well. I mean, how many people are in these very tough elite regiments in the military have come? I've been hurt. No one's going to hurt me like I've been hurt, And anyone else would, if they had to do that training, say, sod that. And there'll be an anger. There'll be a burning desire. And there'll be a need to be tough, to be hard, because you want revenge, no one will ever hurt me like. You can see it when you talk to people. They're like,
And I can also see it in, obviously not a blanket statement, but in certain cases where people who develop that intellect to cover up the immaturity, where that part of them's got stuck.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. Yeah.
And then they go on to be, in inverted commas, successful, and they take on jobs where they got power over other people. Because I often ask myself, I don't think it's a natural thing to want. I don't think that's our part of our humanity, to want power over others, to be able to make decisions about other people's lives. And I've often said, in professional training, we should be looking at the trauma of people that want those kinds of jobs, because when we get it wrong, they can cover things up, deflect, overpower, ruin people's lives. I don't know how that lands for you.
Yeah, and abused.
Yeah.
I mean, I have power, and anyone with power will abuse it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to. Have I abused my power? Of course. Why should I be any different to anyone else with power? Of course I abuse power. And hopefully I'll come on to a minute about the difference in gender.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a difference.
Mm-hmm. People
say there's not. There is. There's a fundamental difference in how women abuse, how men abuse.
Mm-hmm.
The proportionality is different, but there's a massive difference. But if we go back to the last bit, the emotional self, can people go on to achieve with the emotional self? No, it ain't happening. Unless you get help, it ain't happening. That clock stops at the age you was hurt. And you will then have the inability to reason and have the emotional maturity to deal with a problem. So an example I always give, there's this viral video. I'm not denigrating the bloke, 'cause I don't know him, but of a motorcyclist cuts someone up in a car. And the guy he cuts up is called Ronnie Pickering. I'm Ronnie Pickering. You know how I am? And friends just smashed this bloke to pieces, cutting him up on his motorbike. Well, as soon as I saw that, I thought, well, Ronnie, go and get some therapy, mate, because I can see a very emotionally broken little man. I see it in the likes of Andrew Tate. The documentary, although I don't particularly like the guy, but Louis Theroux is a tremendous interviewer. He is. You've got to give him his due, because he's a snake. And how he interviews people. When I used to teach detectives how to interview, I said, look at Louis Theroux. Because he does it by acting stupid. It's a wise man who plays a fool.
Yeah.
And he does that. There's this adversarial thing that comes with interviewing, and so many coppers come back to the power thing, put themselves above. No. You put yourself down there, man. That's how you do it. Especially if you're dealing with sex offenders, because they all think they're clever. And some of them are very clever. Put yourself down there. And someone used to say to me, didn't you want to beat them up? And I went, well, what point would that be?
Yeah.
Why beat them up? If I beat them up, then they're going to tell the solicitor. There's a chance the injuries on my hand will be conducive to the injuries, on their head or whatever. And not only that, where's that going to take me? Nowhere. I'm going to want to go and visit that guy in prison, after I've convicted him. And I'm going to want to be his friend, because I'm going to want him to tell me about everyone he's been working with. And one paedophile will give me 5. And that's how I work. So who's a successful one? Me, who ends up catching paedophile after paedophile and saving the victims, or someone who just bashes them up? It ain't going to get you anywhere. You want to bash people up, go out, get a job where you can do that. But don't do it in this room, because it lacks intelligence, it lacks reasoning, and it does. So they have that inability to reason, and you see that all the time. And as an interviewer, I used to look at the value system. I'd look at what does a man of that age value, or a woman, and you see grown men valuing childish things. And the classic example is that Andrew Tate. He values childish things. And of course, we've got a society of young men that have been brought up without fathers, the lack of that sort of macho influence in their lives. They think they're a failure, and they see this man. But when you look at him, he's highly intelligent, right? He is. He's physically top of his game. But emotionally, there's no one really who's got a modicum of reasoning and understanding in psychology will say that's a balanced man. It's not. I listened to him once again. I'm not knocking him. I don't even know him. But if you're going to put yourself out there where billions of people view you, you know, at least have a few critics. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, I said, well, what was his ideal day? And it was going on a private jet, having a threesome with 2 prostitutes, drinking champagne and eating pizza. And I'm thinking, you're a grown man.
So the way I would look at that,
That's a 12-year-old's wet dream.
Yes, exactly. That's how I would look at that. Is say, so okay, those are the grown-up toys. You know, the prostitute and the pizza or whatever, the grown-up toys that money can buy you. But at what age would a child want? You know, the child equivalent of that, and that's kind of. So I often look at people at their worst and ask myself, what's the emotional age here?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Whereas my job would be to attack them and get them to talk. One of the ones you would do it, and funny enough, he bit at this because, I'd gone about their mother because the mother should protect. No matter what, even if the mother's not the abuser, the lioness should have protected the cubs. So with the emotionally broken people, you look at their way and then talk about their mum and they kick off. He kicked off. He had one of my podcasts and Jon Wedger, you know, but it's sort of proved my point. You know, his actions proved my point that there's a brokenness in there. So that was one sort of thing I'd always look for. And I look for it a lot when I'm watching people or people are talking to me and you start getting... And
the issue is that, you know, obviously a 2-year-old having a 2-year-old tantrum in a 2-year-old body is fine. A 2-year-old who's in a 50-year-old body that might be 6 foot tall,
dangerous,
having a 2-year-old tantrum is really dangerous.
Well, society knows this. Yeah. That's why Africa used child soldiers.
Yeah,
because they're totally lack of emotion, and of course of that narcissism.
Yeah,
you know, they will go and shoot someone over nothing.
Yeah.
What, you take a toy away from a child, I hate you, I want you to die.
Yeah.
But imagine we were at work and I took your paper clipper. I hate, but there are people that do behave like that. And with abuse, studies have been done. It's so interesting. It's because of my detective background, I would look right the way back. There's always a reason. Always. There's a reason why someone parks their car the way they do, how they go in a building. I will always sit. If I was to come in this building, I'd sit in that corner. So I watch that door and I will work out my exit and I can see where, and I don't like people behind me. And that's because I've come from the trauma of the job and experience, and I've been in situations that have been high adrenaline and all that. So I won't sit in the middle of a room, and I'll always be on the edge, always by a door where I can get out. And that's how my mind works. And of course, there's a reason for everything we do, and it's a matter of just sitting there and looking at and wondering why. But we look at children's homes and we think, well, why was there so many survivors that are sort of my age and above that were terribly, terribly badly abused? I mean, without any love, any compassion, physical abuse, beatings and whippings, little kids, and sexually abused throughout the 50s and 60s by women or in ecclesiastical settings by nuns.
Oh, yes.
Why? And then afterwards it changed to the 70s and 80s. It became men on boys. And I spoke to someone, they went, you've just got to look at war society. Look at society. Look what happened in war. And we'll get back. So I started researching it. And then I realised when I was in the police, I was in the West End of London, and I used to recruit the tramps, we call them vagrants, as informants. I was one of 2 people that did it because no one else wanted to go near them because they stank, they were aggressive, they're mentally ill, and they're highly unreliable. But they saw everything. So I started recruiting, and I was very successful. And I got that from watching a documentary about Ian Fleming, who wrote James Bond. And he became one of the most successful spies in the war because he recruited prostitutes. And they called them the Whore Squad, and they were parachuting them into Germany and they were getting more information, you know, per ratio than any other source information unit. And his rationale was, I'm not going to use a spy. These girls already done it. They're already there.
Yeah.
So I saw the same. So the tramps are already there to see it, and they were happy to work with me. So I started getting all this information coming in and everything else from them. And then I realised this person's right. They brought in the Vagrancy Act because it's illegal to be homeless.
Yeah.
But why did they bring it in? They brought it in because we'd come back from the Napoleonic conflicts, pre-First World War. It was a conscript army. As soon as they'd done their job, the British government went, well, F off. And they were so traumatised, they couldn't work, they couldn't do anything, they're laying on the street. But it was bad for the empire. So they made it illegal. So it's not like they're doing them a favour. They've actually put the burden of proof on them.
Yeah.
And then the licensing laws. I had an argument with a Romanian once, and how boring England is. And if you're in Italy, you can drink all night. You can drink and party all night. In England, only this hour and this hour. Well, firstly in Italy, that they changed sides in the war. It's not like we were first in, last out. But it was all to do with the war again. The soldiers were coming back from the First World War, absolutely obliterated in their minds. They couldn't cope. They were dangerous men. A lot of them were farm workers, and they were sent out into these horrific campaigns. They'd not even heard a car backfire. And then boom, 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 they went mad. Well, how did they get rid of it? And it was hand-to-hand fighting. It was bayonet fighting. Well, what did they do? They drank. They drank. Queen Victoria said, give a man beer, you'll never have a revolution. Right? The Falklands War, more British soldiers have died from suicide than died in there. Because I can't cope with it.
We're not designed for this. We're not as humans. That's not human nature. It's not how God intended. We're not built for it. I mean, my family are Maltese, and if you've studied World War II, you'll know
tough bunch, weren't they?
Yeah, you'll know what Malta went through. And one of the things I say is never fuck with the Maltese because, like, we were down to whatever, and Hitler couldn't occupy it. But still, the trauma running down, and you can't get people to talk about it.
Three generations,
you can't get people to talk about it. And my mum was completely traumatised by the war.
Yeah, and one of the worst byproducts of war is rape.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Rape goes hand in hand with it. They're looking at a war now, really? But then we get where, this manosphere, this thing Louis Theroux was doing, and it's all about being tough, being hard. Yeah. Well, carry on, because you're going to end up mentally ill, very mentally ill if you carry on doing that. In the Second World War, they came back, and again, they were dangerous. Some of them had been through 2 wars, and they knew there was a problem. So England had to stop conscription because men weren't letting their kids fight. Yeah. But on top of that, they didn't know. They thought it was going to be a revolution, so they built council houses and working men's clubs. So with that in mind, I thought, right, well, how does that equate to the kids' homes? And what you realise is these kids, there was a lot of kids without mum and dad. They were put in these homes, but the women, they call them war widows, and they'd lost their sons, their husbands, their uncles, and there was a hatred for men. Yeah. And when women will abuse the youngest victim. So when you get babies abused, it tends to be a woman that abuses it, and a woman abuses with a need for adoration. You must respect me. So there's a spitefulness in it. And if a boy's been abused by a woman, they're 6 times more likely to abuse than if they've been abused by a man. It's a shocking statistic. But then, of course, these people were leaving these homes and they were full of anger. And of course, what did we have? We started having race riots. We had football hooliganism. And all of that, a lot of that was a byproduct of the anger of these people. Domestic violence was at an all-time high. But during the 70s and 80s, the men started getting placements in residential homes and abusing. So we got homosexual paedophiles. And the reason was, again, it's all lateral thinking. What happened was you got more abuse went on in Labour constituency than Tory ones. And that was all to do with equality laws. They, especially the London boroughs, inner city boroughs, didn't want to be seen as being judgmental. So they didn't do vetting on any homosexual applicant for a residential placement in a kids' home. I'm in no way saying homosexuals are paedophiles. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, though, if there is a homosexual paedophile, he's not going to get vetted if he applies for one of them jobs. And once one gets in, he gets his mates in. There was a kids' home in South London called Shirley Oaks. They had 19 known and convicted paedophiles working on a residential basis at one time. 19. And you can imagine the damage they cause to children. And then that damage goes on for the next 3 generations.
It's networks, isn't it? It's networks and networks. Because I saw a document. I'd love to get your comment on this. I saw a documentary once that said that there was a whole period in Hollywood, and Shirley Temple is the epitome of it, where they were trying to make lots and lots of films of little girls dancing and singing with older men, and Shirley Temple was the epitome of that, wasn't she? Singing and dancing with, and sort of in what looked like overly familiar friendship. And that this was Hollywood's way to try and see if they could normalise it for the public.
We had it over here. We had a girl called Lena Zavaroli.
Oh, yes, I remember.
And what was she? Anorexic.
Yeah.
And again, you got to look at this, right? Anorexia and overeating are overt symptoms of sexual abuse. I work with autistic kids, and they're non-verbal. I did it for a couple of years. And some are very, very violent. And they had one girl, and all she did was eat mashed up food. And I went to see the deputy head, a really nice guy. I said to him, listen, keep your eye on that girl. Who she live with? They went, well, she lives with mum, but mum's not full ticket. And dad sort of comes and goes. I said, I think she's been sexually abused. He went, how do you know that? How could she can't tell you? You know, how would you know when she's eating mashed up food? And he laughed at me. He went, well, so what? I said, well, you don't understand. Mashed up food, something solid's gone in her mouth and she don't like it. That's how the brain works, right? So not eating is, I can control. I might not be able to control what goes in there, but what goes in there, I control it.
It is about control.
So I'm not putting, so they won't eat.
Yeah.
Overeating is like a comfort thing, but also it might be, if I look ugly, they'll leave me alone. You know, and you get that with cross-dressing. If I dress as a girl, they'll stop doing this to me. So there's these deep-rooted psychological things that come. I mean, child abuse
that aren't being talked about because there's nowhere to talk about it, and then it manifests. Of course, it does. Something it shows up somewhere.
Anger is trauma. And then I started. So 1 in 10 of the people I spoke to, they were a bit different. 1 in 10, so 10% of the survivors I interviewed had a thing called DID. And it's called dissociated identity disorder, multiple personalities. And their stories were that they come from ritual abuse, Satanism, or the like. It's all the same. Wherever it is in the world, it's the same. And that makes their mind fracture. And it's such a spiteful thing. And they call them altars. And they'll have a period of that. It's like an army. So you'll get the main altar and then these little regiments of it afterwards. And they've all got very childish names. And they'll relate to the abuse that was given to them. So one girl, her mother used to drown her on a regular basis and get a near-death experience out of her and then resuscitate her. And she called that altar Drippy. So whenever she's put in a bath, Drippy comes in and it switches her off from what's happening. And she had another one called Sparky because they would electrocute her. And so if she deals with anything electrical, so you could electrocute her, it wouldn't make no difference. She wouldn't even flinch because the altar can deal with it and take it. But they're broken. And again, you see that in Hollywood with films like Split and all that. It's showing these superhero things. You know, 1 minute I'm a tough superhero, split personality. And they're showing you. And that is, they call it MK Ultra, but it's the same thing. This is what happens when you do that to them. And when they go and talk, they can't. And then the next thing, they'll hate you or they'll become suicidal because they implode. But what they can't torture someone not to do is to draw. So quite a few of the survivors, you get them to draw.
Yes. And
some are accomplished artists and they'll draw it for you. One was so good, she drew a graveyard where a baby was buried that was ritually killed. So they'd wait till the grave is dug for someone, and then they'll go in there and they'll do a ritual in that grave and then put some mud over it. So when the coffin's lowered, it's actually lowered on top of. But so good, we actually found the grave, but we couldn't get the authorities to sort of go any further with it. But you start getting this satanic ritual abuse stuff. And then I found the RAINS list, which is what Dr. Joan Coleman at the Wolseley Hospital wrote, and it's a 16-page document. So if 2 or more people independently name one person, they went on this list. So she had it to a journalistic standard, and she made it a public document. And it's a who's who and a what's what of child abuse, child murder, child sacrifice. It names them, it gives addresses, even gives car registration numbers and phone numbers. My old boss in the police is named on it. He's named on it. Peter Mandelson's named on it. Peter Mandelson is named for being involved in the alleged murder of a child. And that was 20 years ago this list come out. So they're acting on the Epstein. Why did they not act on that list? That list has been handed to Brian Gerrish has seen it. He worked with a man called Robert Greene. Robert Greene handed that to Theresa May. I handed it to a woman who ran a kids' charity. She gave it to David Cameron, and then he took the funding away for a kids' charity, a charity called Kids Company.
We know that story.
Destroyed her.
Yeah, we know that story.
Because of that RAINS list, you know.
And that's interesting. But I suppose the thing that's coming up for me as you're talking is, of course, you've been involved in this for years and years and years, right? You've seen it all. This is lived experience. This is knowledge. It's not made up. It's not supposition. It's not drawing a conclusion. It's stuff you've actually been on the sidelines of, seen, prosecuted probably, when you were in the police and all the rest of it. But when people, to the general public and the mainstream, this is quite new. It's only in the public domain a short while. And the first thing that happens to people when we give people information that's big, the first thing that happens is disbelief, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a period of disbelief.
Well, you could give them a video footage of their most favourite film star, because it's idolatry. They idolise these people, and they still won't accept it. There will be a cognitive dissonance on a global level because they won't accept it. I mean, But
it changes the face of everything that we've been told to put our trust in. That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, then where do we go from here?
I spoke to, I ended up working with a profiler for the FBI, and she offered her services to me. She said, I can help. And she's been brilliant. So what she's done for me, she said, if you know anyone that needs therapy, I will willingly do it. But she lives abroad. She lives in Europe. And we did have one guy, and he was on the point dangerous. He was a danger to himself and others. And I introduced him to her, and we did an online Zoom. And she said, get him out of the country, bring him to me. Had we not done it, he'd be dead and other people would be dead. He got hold of a sidearm, and he was going to do a lot of damage with it. And he got out there, and he's come back. He was out there. She looked after him, all out of her own pocket. She took him on. I vouched for him as much as I could. But he's come out now, and that was a few years ago. He's not been back in trouble. He's got himself a job. He's working hard. So now the money that society's paid for this guy, he was one of the UK's most prolific armed robbers. The money that's been spent in his incarceration, his mental health,
absolutely,
not only that, housing him because he can't work, paying his universal credit and all that. Well, why can't they invest and just put it right? And not only that, the ones who did it to him, prosecute them, go after them.
Yes,
but they don't want to. So, crime, on a policing perspective, is uniform coppers in shit areas. We don't work good areas because there's no need to, right? On that sort of low level, what they call beat crime, you'll be on a housing estate chasing around what we used to call scroats. Your thieves, your burglars, your violent people, and they would have come from intergenerational thieves, burglars, everything else. Yeah. So one housing estate will have 5 families causing chaos for everyone.
That's right. Yeah.
And that be 8%, maybe more of your work will be them people.
Yes.
And some love it, and that's it. Carry on. But it's predictive, and it goes by this little algorithm, and it's low down. The middle classes, do they really do much? Not really. Don't really hear from them. They're very comfortable in how they live. They call it a middle class ghetto, but they can be dangerous with their opinions because they see everything a bit fluffy, and then we never get near the upper classes, and they sort of get neglected, really. But what I didn't realise is that the upper classes and the ruling classes got a lot in common with the lower and the working.
They always say that, yeah.
And they have, and I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
It was a traveller told me, a gypsy told me that. And I never cottoned on until recently. But child abuse is different. The child abuse, it doesn't know any boundaries.
Discriminate. No,
it doesn't.
No.
We're seeing wokeism in society. Now, let me tell to all the wokies out there, you've got nothing. You're actually right-wing Nazis compared to paedophiles and Satanists. They don't care who, what, where, why, how. They're not interested. We used to call them trisexuals. So they're not hetero, they're not bi, they're not homo. They try anything, and they don't care. They'll have a liking. It might be a little boy under 7, but if there's a girl who's over 14, that'll do. Mm-hmm. An animal do it. If they're disabled, that'll do. If they're black and they like whites, that'll do. You know, and so they're far above it, and it's a dirty secret because they're broken people. Paedophiles are broken. They're absolute, and out of 10% you need to write off. The other 90, therapy and prison sentence and restorative justice can make a better difference. At least you can stop others being abused. Right? They're going about castration. Well, that ain't going to work, and I'll tell you for why. In order to complete an offence, there needs to be 2 criteria. Right? We call it the mens rea and the actus rea, a little bit of Latin there. So the mental attribute to it and the physical attribute to it. So if your intention is to commit that offence, you can prove that intention by people's actions, thoughts, writings, everything else, conspiracies to do it. Right? You've got one element, but then you've got to do it. Once they do it, case complete. Bang. It's not enough just to do something. You've got to want to do it, mean to do it. So it's connected. So if you castrate someone, you cut off their testicles, well, that's only going to affect the actus reus. It's not going to affect the mens reus. No. They're still going to think about doing it, and they can still plot and plan to do it. So it's only 50% of the solution.
Or help others to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Or it might even make them worse because they're so angry now that they can't. So no, that's not the problem. That's not how it works.
So what you're saying, if I've completely understood you, which for me is, it's really important that, you know, in any kind of group or category or whatever you want to say, there are always going to be those that are unreachable. When you're saying there's a small proportion, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, we had a guy talking about IPPs, and he said with the 2,500 that are left, there's probably 900 now so angry, so damaged that you couldn't let them out of prison anyway by now, right? But what you're saying is, okay, so there are some that are going to be unreachable for whatever reason, and then, if I understand you, the rest are healable to the degree that you could at least prevent further.
Offending.
Could at least further offending.
But they need monitoring.
But that's a wonderful. I mean, you know, then when I hear you, you know, because you're sharing all this information, when I hear you say that, I think, well, that's an amazing. I mean, that gives us a lot of hope. You know, gives me hope because, you know, I go into prisons and I work with people, and I see turnarounds, and I see this possibility. I mean, obviously on a really small scale, but you know, to hear that, it's just like amazing.
And that's coming from someone who spent their career persecuting these people. You know.
Yes.
But I'm not doing them any favours. But if putting them in a position where they can be managed and prevention put in, then there was a statistic that one active paedophile can affect 1,200 lives in their lifetime of offending. Now, that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
You know, and 10% of them are going to go on to do it themselves. So 120 of them are going to go on. And they themselves could then individually create. And there's this statistic. There was a charity called 1 in 4 that said 1 in 4 people have been abused. There was a family called Judge Thomas said 1 in 3. 1 in 3, I think you'll look at. So when people say that it's not really in people's sphere, it is, but you've got to recognise it. Yeah. And the first way I recognise it's anger. Anger, straight away, bang. You know that's where they come from. But then you'll get like the upper classes, you know. So take what the societal narrative that it's provincial towns. So we've not seen one case of this so-called grooming, this new term grooming from London. Who was policing it? Me and a girl. It was me and a girl for a population of 10 million. You know, I don't know how many people live in Burnley, but it ain't 10 million. And, you know, and Great Manchester, and they had a squad of 50 people on this. And they come out with this thing, 3 Girls, that documentary. Well, we found 3 girls in 3 minutes. And I found 52 kids in 3 days. It was crazy, you know. So when we look at how big a problem it is, we need to properly break this down and then realise that there's a whole economy built around it as well. From cradle to grave, these kids make money. You know, they make money for the lawyers, charging £450 an hour. They'll deal with the family court because the baby's been born into an abusive family. So then they put them into care. So then that starts. And the chance of that kid then getting abused is quite large. You know, I'm not saying it's a given. There's some brilliant foster parents and you know, and adopted, you know, but what a lot of people I deal with have come from that demographic. You know, then the kids get angry, you know, the school gets involved, they end up in a juvenile court, and then that machine starts again, £450 an hour. Then they go to the magistrate's court, then the Crown Court, then prison, then the coroner's court.
Well, one of the things that I've always said is, you know, in the work that I do, which is around dialogue, around having the real conversation, you know, that's the important thing, is where can we have the real, because there aren't many places that we can, you know, you're very courageous because what you're trying to do is bring the real conversation out. Let's have the real conversation. Let's not pussyfoot around or politicise or whatever. Let's just have the real conversation. And what I say, in all areas of society, whole industries are built up around not having the real conversation.
Yeah, they are. And then you think the prisons, 8% have come from abusive childhood backgrounds, 80%. So in essence, if we stop abusing our kids, we could actually reduce that prison population in a heartbeat by 80%. And you think of suicides, you think of medication, psychotropic medication, domestic violence. All those who commit domestic violence have come from abuse. Heroin addicts.
Absolutely, yes.
Why are they taking an analgesic as strong as heroin? I was in central London today and I watched 2 people, I don't know how old they are, maybe in their 30s. I was on a bridge, I was looking down at a towpath on the canal, and I watched them shoot up heroin. And then they laid in amongst shite on the floor, and they were both gouged out like that. And then they got up after 5 minutes. I sat there with a little roll-up cigarette watching them, and then their day started all over again. And I thought, I know you, I know what's going through.
Yeah.
I know the damage you cause as well because of this lifestyle choice, and they'll be having kids. But when we go and so if we look at the grooming gangs, and we got a Pakistani minicab driver, and he's got a liking for a little white girl, and I want to bring in something about the Mayor of London, which I called him out on, and he goes and tells this girl, "Oh, you're lovely, you're beautiful." And he's got a car, and she's got low expectations in life. I'm not saying all of them. So I know a couple of girls that happen to that not like that, but on the whole, let's stick with the majority. And they get in, and then let's go and get your mate. Because a lot of the grooming gangs, it's the girls themselves that end up recruiting.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it's a fact. Yes. And that's what happens in the care homes. They get the girls to get them.
Yeah.
So, well, who's doing it? Well, a lot of the girls are doing it themselves. Yeah. It's not it's peer pressure, you know, and they're outside of the remit of criminal responsibility. But we need to say they are, you know, and some do actively do it because, you know, anyway. So bring your mate along. So what's that? It's grooming, ingratiating yourself for the purpose of exploiting them criminally. And they put them in a car and they take them into a kebab shop, curry house, or whatever, I don't know, you know, where them and others get them drunk and then they rape them. Well, that's trafficking. And trafficking is a movement from point A to point B for the purpose of crime. Right? Them men should stand trial for rape. And that's that. Life sentence, lifetime sexual offending, you know, and if you could, maybe you'll get out after so many decades inside. But bang, that's it. You ain't going to offend again. Lock them up. That's how it should be doing. And it's achievable. I've done it. Why can't other people do it? And then we look at the posh schools, the elite fee-paying schools. Let's look at them. There's a lovely group called Seen and Heard. Let me give them a big shout out because, you know, they're climbing a mountain here, these boys. They really are. And they've been neglected and ignored by the police and by society because they're posh kids, so stuff them is the attitude. You know, they're taken away from their mothers. So not even teenagers. These are little kids that are in infant school age. Right? They're taken away, divested is the word, and they're put into these antiquated workhouse type environments, 50 kid dorms. They've been used to warm house with a teddy and a dog and mummy and daddy and blah, blah, blah. They're put in there. They cry because they would cry. I even get homesick and I'm a man, you know, and they cry. And I was told this story and it sort of breaks my heart. There's a few times this has happened when I've interviewed kids, it's broke my heart. And it gives me a bit of a resolve to go after him. And he said that the master come in. He said he was a games master. So he said, can you imagine how strong his arms were? And he said, right, what young boys are still awake and they're all cheeky and went, me sir, come with me then. Thinking that they would be taken and given a little cup of cocoa or something. And he took them and he got their heads and tied them to the base of a pool table, stripped them naked and whipped them. 7, 6-year-old boys. What? Can we get our heads around that? The screams. They would have urinated themselves with fear. They may have defecated themselves. A grown man with naked boys whipping them. And if they cried, they got another one. So they internalised their fear, you know, and it was fear. And then when they went back, the older boys had been through all that, and boys have got testosterone. Boys spend an inordinate period of their living life masturbating or thinking about masturbating. Let's get it right. I say this to him, we go, oh, don't say that, I've got a teenage son. Well, we can't move forward then, can we, if you think that? But they do. It's called testosterone. And it's called the fagging system.
That's right. Yes,
the fagging system, where they deputise the discipline from the dons, from the dons of the school, to these boys. And again, unreasonably emotionally broken men are then given the power to discipline little boys. Young men with testosterone who are survivors of physical and sexual and emotional abuse themselves are now put in charge of boys. And whatever they do will not in any way be adjudicated on. So they whip them boys and they whip them. You know, and that is it.
And it's kind of like there's something like on the one hand, there's something about, you know, oh, you're actually sort of saying it, Jon. You know, you're saying this out loud. You're saying the unspeakable. And on the other hand, you know, my whole thing is we've got to begin these conversations. We've got to be able to say it and go, it is horrific.
Well, we're going to go deeper now. We're going to go deeper. So let's take a 6-year-old boy, 7-year-old boy. He's got a 7-year-old anus. And it's not built to accommodate a man's penis or any penis at any age. It's not built for that. And it's called a sphincter muscle. And it's not a vagina. A vagina is a wall of muscles. It's designed to expand and contract. And again, on gender studies, women are different. They've got displacement in hips, natural displacement. In podiatry, when you go to a murder scene, you know if a man or a woman has run away from that murder scene, right? Because of a thing called the gait. Women have got a gait out there, an obtuse gait. Men have got an acute gait, right? And that's it. Men walk with their feet pitched inwards because their hips are. Women that because of displacement. So when they say we're the same, no, we ain't. We physically ain't. You know, so that's that. But, you know, when you do that, the sphincter muscle is a hoop made up of a chain. You rip them little chains. They rip. Yeah. They don't go back without surgery. And if you do that to a boy, you're going to rip those little muscles. They're going to tear. So when you sodomise a little boy or a girl, you tear their muscles. When they rape girls, they displace their wombs. Their wombs misalign. There's more chance that they're going to miscarry because of the damage to the womb. They're going to have damage to their spine. and you're going to rip their bladder as well, and you're going to rip their colon.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get older, your anus is not going to do its job. Well, it's not going to do its job when you're younger, and you're going to leak.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to be an airtight muscle, which it's meant to be. And if it goes on, you'll defecate yourself. And there's a lot of men that have been abused, and women, but let's stick with the men for the time being. They're self-employed because they can't. They can't. They can't do it. There's men, their marriages fail because they can't sleep in the bed because in the morning they'd have soiled that bed and they're ashamed. They do their own washing because every time their pants, they're stained. And I had a guy tell me this once. And he said, I got a job. My dad was abusing me. 16, and I was a 16-year-old boy that went and I worked in an architect's office. And he said, I sat there and I just leaked poo and a smell. And I ran out and I couldn't go back. And he was sitting there crying, grown man. He said, I can't get a job. I want to be with people. I can't because of smell. You know, and ends up having wear pads or cologne. And, you know, and so when people say that there's health in anal sex, no, there's not. It's damaging. And that damage to that boy wasn't physical anymore. It was mental and traumatic.
Well, of course, yeah.
For the rest of his life.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I mentioned this on an interview, and I got a guy contact me, and he was a man that was involved in serious and organised criminality. And he rang me up and he said, I'm so and so. And I thought, oh, blimey, what I've done. He said, you need to listen to me. He said, you said something, you know, and it really affected me. And I thought I was in trouble. And he said, I want to thank you. And he said, I made my missus listen. This is why I sleep in the other room. This is why I'm angry. This is why I get violent. You know, this. And his missus burst into tears and, you know, they come to some consolation between the two. But he was too ashamed to say anything. So, you know, and then you get those that will do it to the other boys. There's many that don't, but there's others that do.
Mm-hmm.
And then where do they go from there? They go to Sandhurst.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in charge of regiments. And then they'll get themselves a job in the city.
So this is what I was saying about doing
Politics.
this trauma work with people, understanding why they want power and control over others.
But not just power and control. We take the Bullingdon Club where we had Blair, Cameron and Johnson. You know, look at where they all went to. You know, all went to eat and maybe they went through all this. Now they're in charge of a whole nation.
Yes.
Are they going to put child abuse down as number one priority? No, they're not.
No, because the problem is that it's, if everybody's got their secrets, you know, the things that are shame of either what's happened to them or what they've done to others, either way, how do you crack that open?
Well, not only that, it will have huge blackmail value. So years ago, politicians will be subject to blackmail.
Yes, of course.
I got a job, and it was dealing with secret information. It's what's known as a field intelligence officer for the police's version of like the FBI, really, you know, or whatever, CIA, whatever you want to know. Anyway, top secret information. I had to be vetted. So I go along to this place at Scotland Yard for vetting. And we have a talk. A senior officer comes down. It's a woman to talk. And she said, I wouldn't pass vetting. I'm thinking, oh, well, you're saying, she said, I'm a lesbian. And lesbians don't pass vetting. Gay men don't pass vetting. I thought, wow, that's a bold statement in this day and age. And she said, I'm going to tell you why. Because they don't think we can be trusted because of the higher levels of promiscuity. So it says that your sexual life and your sexual activities will affect your security placement because you've got more chance of being blackmailed. Yeah. And also if you're a debtor, you're in a lot of money trouble because you can be swayed. And they're things that you can't almost consciously control. Oh, yeah. Do you know what I mean? So you will fail vetting. Well, what about the people that are in Parliament that are in charge of, you know, the Home Secretary? You know, how many times did Leon Britton's name crop up in inquiry? I'm telling you now, a few. Open source stuff is out there, public domain. He was Home Secretary. He was handed many, many files by an MP called Geoffrey Dickens, which involved the abuse of children and the ritualistic abuse of children, the involvement of politicians, they all went missing. Yet he was the fastest promoted Home Secretary ever. We've just seen the case of Bishop John Smythe, right, who was protected by Justin Welby, the Church of Diocese of Church of England, you know, and the Archbishop Justin Welby, in charge of all the bishops. John Smythe ran this elite group for Christian boys, an old Etonian himself. Again, if you look at John Smythe, the fastest ever promoted QC in history. He went on to successfully defend and assist the Christian Church of England, you know, on many of their legal issues. You know, a guy that was in his 50s, yet fit as a man in his 20s. We've got that again. We've got the intellectual tick. You know, achieved the maximum we could. No one's ever beat him in how he's progressed through the ranks in that sort of legalistic world. Again, physically fit, man in immense fitness. And what was he doing? He was taking young men into his shed and his own son at night, stripping them down and sort of offering them to understand the wounds of Christ on the cross by whipping their buttocks and sexually assaulting them. I mean, the moment I watched it was only at the end of a 2-part documentary by Channel 4. They revealed really what was done. But I knew within 5 minutes, this man was a sadistic homosexual paedophile. Yeah. Straight away, I knew what he was. You know, and so how can they not know? You know, again, we've got these people that have attained it right at the top, and they know there's always an audit trail with them. The protection officers for politicians, senior politicians, and for our monarchy, they know. So, they see and they know.
So look, John, we're coming to the end of our time together. I mean, this is fascinating, and we could sit here for 3 or 4 hours because you know, you're clearly a powerhouse. You're knowledgeable. You know, you speak with authority because it's real experience. Okay. And I suppose one part of me is you're a real threat, aren't you, to a lot of people?
Do you know, this is ironic you said it. I was.
Right.
Because when I first spoke out, the politicians get ministerial jobs.
Yeah.
They specialise. So at the time, the Tories were in, Theresa May's government, and her cabinet minister for policing and crime backed me, really backed me.
Oh, right.
And he had heard rumours that I was a potential threat, and he supported me. And I had a meeting with the Home Secretary and the Home Office once, and he stood up, this cabinet minister, and said, had I not stood by him, Jon Wedger would not be alive to this day. And I said, well, what do you mean? He went, I seriously believe that you would have been done in. So yeah, maybe.
And yet then also I think what compels me to listen to you is that you're a bloke, you know, you've been in the police, you've done, you know, you've put people, you know, whatever it is, but there is a deep compassion running through you, a very deep, I don't know if people will get that, but sitting in your presence, I really feel this deep compassion. It's not, you don't want to be right. You don't want to.
I don't want money.
You don't want anything.
Privilege or power or anything.
But I definitely. Well, firstly, it's where we started, which is protecting children.
Yeah.
Right? Because protecting children is a natural human thing, and also because what you've been able to show us is the damage it does way beyond.
Do you know, they carry their wounds.
Yes.
And not only that, there's many go on to hurt others.
That's right.
You know, and then at what point do they become a victim and then they become an offender? They're still the same person. They are. And I looked down today, like I said, I had an ex-missus who wasn't a good person. I won't go in. I'm not into slagging people, but she wasn't good. So she had 2 children before I met her, and they were going to put them into care. And I started working with survivors of care, and they said, don't ever put your kids in care. And we all stayed together. You know, I'm going on holiday with the older one. You know, we're best mate. We love each other so much, me and my boys. whether they're my biological son or they're not. But what would have happened if they'd gone into care? And it was a realistic possibility. And when I looked down from that bridge today, and I watched these two people walk along, and then they go to a verge, and I think they're picking rubbish. I think they're just litter picking. And then they sit on the floor, and they're just clearing the ground, and then they inject themselves with heroin, and then they slump down, and there's dog poo, and one's fallen in it, and they're like that on a footpath that stank of urine. And I'm thinking, that's someone's child.
Yeah.
Someone's done that to them.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying that they're clean people, their hearts might not be clean, they might be nasty, but there was a point when they weren't.
Yeah.
Someone's put them there.
It's a corruption.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's a corruption that's happened along the way.
And it's still there, and I'm still seeing it. And if I see it, then why does society not see it? Why does a minister, Tony Blair employed a minister for children, and that cabinet minister was patronising a group called PI, Paedophile Information Exchange, that wanted the age of consent between men and girls to be 14 and men and boys to be abolished. And this woman patronised this group, they were annexed to the Labour Party. There's three women cabinet ministers, all right honourables. There was nothing righteous honourable about any of them. They're perverts. Why are we allowing it? It's got to stop. It has to stop. And it just, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but conspiracies do exist because you can conspire. Mm-hmm. It's two people that owned, is an interesting fact of law in British law, right? Conspiracy is two people getting together for a criminal cause, The only two people who can't conspire are husband and wife. Yeah. So Fred and Rose West. But look at Epstein. Look at what happened to him. Look at Fred and Rose West. Were they not doing the same?
Exactly.
Was not Fred's demise exactly the same? So we look at Epstein. Well, what about Fred West?
Yeah.
He was doing exactly the same. There's not hundreds, but there's dozens of missing children in and around this guy that they've not yet found. He was a connected man, him and his missus, and they were getting kids for parties and there was a bigger thing going with them. He died in exactly the same way. We got the Rains list. It tells you what these people were doing, even murder of children. It's in there, and the rape of children. And there's household names on there. Why are we looking at the Epstein list? Because it's glamorous and it's over there. Yet we got it. Don't shake our heads thinking it don't exist because it goes on here.
So this has been really, it's been really moving to sit in your presence, Jon. And I don't know if there's anything I can do to help victims or, in the work that you're doing. Please, do call on me if there's anything small or whatever.
Yeah, I think victims want one thing, they want healing.
Yes.
And healing comes about ultimately through justice.
Yeah.
And they ain't getting any.
Right.
But it's healing, that's all they want.
And so, as we draw this to a close, what one thing, what one sentence, what one phrase could you use to really drive home the mission here?
Well, what I usually finish with is I do a call out. And I do a call out to survivors and say, it's not your shame, don't carry that shame.
Fantastic.
And I call out to paedophiles.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Stop it. It was done to you.
Yeah.
You know the pain. And if we think these people haven't got empathy, they have.
Mm-hmm.
They know what it was like. Mm-hmm. They know that fear. Mm-hmm. They know that pain. Mm-hmm. They can empathise, but they don't sympathise. Stop it. And to those involved in the abuse of kids through Satanism, stop it.
Get help.
Get help. Stop it. Yeah. Get help now.
Find
Stops
help.
now.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for giving me your time with everything that you've been through yourself.
Yeah, no,
much appreciated.
Well, what would the point be if I kept it all to myself?
Yeah.
I went on this journey, so no one else has to go on it. Yeah. And please don't take on the government because they'll crush you. Yeah. Unless you've really got the appetite for it. Yeah. Don't put your family at risk. And no one else should have to go through that. We should be that far down the line now that we should stop putting it right now.
Thank you. Much love to you.
Yeah, thank you so much.